Everybody. I'm back with Jessica Ellicott, my fellow Wicked author, historical mystery writer. And of course, when you write historical novels, you have a whole extra layer of research you have to do because it's not now. You can't just go look something up about now or talk to somebody about now. Um, excuse me. So we're going to talk about um, how we conduct our research, what our good sources have been, how we taken field trips, and then how do we keep track of what we've learned. Um, and of course, we all know that we don't put in everything we've learned about the research. It informs the story, and maybe 10% of it gets onto the page, but that's a really important 10%. Um, so how did, like, especially for your 1920s books, Jessica, how did you, what are the best ways you found to do research to tell you about that era and what's going on and what you want to write about?
So great question. I love this question. I love research. I know we both do. We
Excuse me.
both
I
love
do
it.
too.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
I my go-to place to start is with the newspaper archive. So what I really love to do is just to get in and browse. Generally speaking, I start my books with a place. So I know the location. I don't necessarily know the era. I don't necessarily know who the main characters are. I know the place. I don't know. I'm surprised that that's the case for me, but it seems to be over and over it happens. So it's been working. I'm just rolling with it. So I know like that I'm setting it in England. So I have the British subscription to the British newspaper archive, and then I have newspapers.com for things I do in the US. And so I open up
Nice.
and I go poking and looking. And when I find something that interests me, I drill down, I save it, I look for the next, pull the next thread on that and keep roving through the newspaper archive. In the case of my World War II era books, I knew where I was setting it and when I was setting it. And so I actually just spent a month's worth of working time reading the newspaper from the beginning of war being declared um, in September of 39 right through all of 1940. And I read it every issue of the Hull Daily Mail at, through my working period, and as if I were somebody who was getting the news that day delivered to my home as I'm like trying to navigate this stressful situation that would be being in a state of war. And for me, that's a really immersive way to feel like those details that you're talking about, that 10% that'll get squeezed out onto the page, I get steeped in it and it feels so immersive for me that it's easier for me to go ahead and do that as a writer to express it on out. Um, that's my first go-to. Other things end up following, like on-site research and the like, but that's my very first thing. How about you? Where do you start?
Wow, that's a great, I mean, just going through the newspaper. I don't think I've read whole newspapers like that. Um, I think I start writing the story
Hmm.
and then I settle on the year and the month, and then I go read the newspapers. What's happening? What's
Mhm.
happening then? And how much did milk cost?
Mm.
And what are people talking about it? What kind of language are they using to talk about it? Um, yeah, so newspapers are a great source. For my Quaker series set here in Amesbury, there are a couple of histories, especially of that really booming late second half of the 19th century when the carriage industry was just internationally famous and people came from all over the world to buy carriages. And there were all the different industries to support the actual carriage, making the leather seats and
Mm.
making the wheels and all that different stuff. And a really active textile factory right down the street from where I live. Um, so I can read those histories and about the parties that the wives of the carriage factory owners threw for the guests during that big spring visiting week. Um, and where could I drop a body in one of those parties? um, Always that. Remember, we're writing stories, we're writing mysteries, so we want to inform it. And then, and then, I found, thanks to a fellow uh, mystery author in New York, she sent me a link to a manual. It's not on my shelf. A manual of police procedure for in Massachusetts from 1875 or 1880. And it's got
Wow.
all these little case studies, little vignettes. So when they arrested someone, the arresting officer had to touch their shoulder or touch somewhere on the body of the person they were arresting to make physical contact when they said, I arrest you for. And I thought nobody else, and I put it in the book, of course, the books, nobody else knows that that's accurate, but I do. And it
Right,
is. And
right.
it's just that little kind of detail that pops,
And
pops the
those are such a
story.
pleasure, aren't they, to have that kind of the research that would be a specialty item like that. Like, I love finding physical resources like that. I have a 1920s, looking at it right now, the Portland Directory from 1923. So it was the phone book, sort of 1923 Portland, Maine. But it lists the name of the person, their marital status, their occupation, and their address. And so you can actually
Uh-huh.
go through it. You could write every single I could write every book for the rest of my life that I ever write, pulling characters, occupations, locations, marital statuses from this directory. And it feels so creepy now to think
Yeah.
about like people knowing that much about you, like Mrs. So and so, who's a widow who lives on like a ground floor flat. That's a vulnerability that people
Yes.
can just open up and know that about her. So those, like you're saying, that specialty knowledge of the police procedures
Right.
or the specialty knowledge of the types of jobs and the types of rooming
Yeah.
situations, it makes a difference to the
Yeah.
authenticity of what you write.
Speaking of borderline creepy, I stay in a little retreat cottage on Cape Cod in the off season usually and do a lot of writing for a week at a time. And it's right behind the Quaker Meeting House and which is surrounded by the burying ground, by the cemetery.
Mm,
So I just wander through and get names. I take
absolutely.
pictures of gravestones for names for fabulous names from the 19th century, Quaker names. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's
that's
another
really,
great research thing is the Social Security Administration database
yes,
and
right.
like which eras were names popular. I love to look at that and pull it up by the decade. And I'm usually pretty good at guessing, like coming up with the names. They come pretty naturally, but I use that to verify the database
Right,
to verify that my
right.
instincts are correct. But I also like to look at it from a standpoint of what kind of person is this? Are they a person whose parents would have been attracted to a very conservative choice? Like it wouldn't have make any waves to name their child this. It came from the top 10 most popular names in that decade, or
Uh-huh.
did they pick it from the bottom of the thousand names that are listed? And what would that have
Right.
done to influence this character's life that they were always having to spell their name or be having people think it's unusual, explain themselves? It adds to it to get to poke through that
Yeah,
kind of research too.
yeah, for sure. For my Dot and Amelia book, I read at least the first half of East to the Dawn, which is kind of the definitive biography of Amelia Earhart. So many details about the house they lived in and how she and her sister would go out. They were such tomboys that her mother made them bloomers to go under their dresses because they were always doing cartwheels and shooting squirrels and in Iowa. Um, Little tiny details like that are just fascinating. And so, yeah, the physical books, your reference bookshelf, just invaluable for sure. And catalogs, the Montgomery Ward catalog for the era,
Yes, yes.
that's this is how much a watch cost, and this is the style of dresses, and yeah,
And this is actually what's
bicycles.
available, like things that people bought in enough that were popular enough that like I have a Sears and Roebuck reproduction catalog from the
Yeah,
18 like maybe
reproduction. Yeah.
96, and it is fascinating the types of things that would have been popular enough to include. Like, oh, and the things that you wouldn't expect, like embalming fluid. Buy your own embalming fluid. Just
Right.
wow.
Right. Or your
Okay.
arsenic. Or your
Yeah,
arsenic for the
yeah,
rats.
yeah.
Right? The rat
Abs
poison.
Absolutely. It's just crazy.
Cyanide.
Just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what things did
And
cost.
the
Yeah.
yeah, and the patent medicines with cocaine and bourbon or cognac in them or whatever they were. Like, oh boy,
Yeah.
that'll cure it or not.
So many fun research opportunities are out there, especially in physical format, the things you encounter. I ended up with
Exactly.
for my Old Orchard Beach books, they center around a spiritualist hotel. And so there's all kinds of that sort of psychic woo sort of stuff. And a friend of one of my sisters had encountered a huge stash of spiritualist books that someone was throwing out. They were like leaned up against a dumpster. And she grabbed them and brought them to my sister and said, I think Jesse would like these. Do you want to give them to her? And so they're in my library. It's this kooky collection of somebody. I am imagining that somebody died and their relatives were just like purging their house and didn't have any use for them. And so chucked them out. And now they're in my library and they make a great addition to my research.
So you did a field trip to research. You went to a spiritualist. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because those
So
are really the hands-on experiential research is so much fun too.
it is really fun. I went with a dear friend out to Lilydale, New York, which is a spiritualist enclave, and they're open primarily in the summer. There was a really popular thing to do in the 1800s to go to these sort of retreat things. And there are still so many people who live there in the summer. They own cottages in this little tiny village. There's a hotel, they have evening meetings, they have readings. You can book appointments for all kinds of different psychic readings. I went and did one, it was really fun. Um, it you can take classes on different things. They have speakers and teachers. It was a magnificent place to get to go because the second book in that series, I actually finished up the last quarter of that book, writing it there on location in Lilydale from my
Great,
hotel room in
great.
there.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to be steeped in that kind of uh, like a community feeling about that sort of thing, which is also present in the books. So that was
Yeah.
really lovely to get to just be soaked in it in that way. Yeah. I know you've done stuff with your Quaker things by being at your church and other things within your community,
Yes.
right?
But I also, well, I trained as a docent in the John Greenleaf Whittier Home Museum, which is halfway between my house and the Quaker Meeting House. I mean, it's a 5-minute walk. Um, and learned so much about Whittier, he's a character in the books. He's a
Mhm.
supporting character. But I also spent 24 hours more at the Norlands Washburn Living History Center in Livermore, Maine,
I've
which
always wanted
is
to
a
go there.
1870 farmhouse, and you live the life for 24 hours. I mean, and I have a long homespun skirt, and I wore that and an apron and little boots, so I kind of had the feeling of
Mm.
wearing that kind of clothing. The first thing you do is you go out and dig the carrots you're going to have for dinner, and you press the apples for the cider you're going to drink all weekend.
Mhm.
We didn't have to kill the chickens that we roasted, but it was, and the staff are all in costume and character of people
Fun.
who were part of the family or worked for the family. Um, and yeah, we made our porridge the next morning, and then we went to school, and it was like being in a Laura Ingalls Wilder book. You know, the one room schoolhouse, and we had to stand up when we were called, and we had our little slates to write on and a poem to memorize, and then
Wow.
we had to invite the teacher to come and have, you know, midday dinner with us after class. So she came along and had dinner. And there was one maiden aunt who did not sit at the dinner table with us. She was a little bit shunned. And
Oh,
I picked up some great language. Like she said, well, he crossed the river.
hmm hmm
So
hmm
that's somebody dies, they cross
yes,
the dark river. Um, and we ate samp, which is cornmeal porridge. And
okay.
anyway, it was so, and, you know, and we had the outhouse and the chamber pot under the bed, right, for our
Now
personal
that is a
needs.
dedication to research.
It was great. It was really just informed some more of those really important little details in
Right,
in my stories.
right.
Yeah.
There's
So
nothing
how
like
do
it.
you keep track of all the things you learn in your research so that you remember if you're writing book 3 or 6, you know, that detail about stoves that you learned before you started writing book 1 or
Mm.
whatever?
So within the newspaper archive,
Hmm.
there's the ability to clip articles and save them.
Mm,
So I clip and save articles with keywords that only probably make sense to me. And I'm able to find
yeah.
them again because they're the, cookie tag that I gave it. I also use Trello, which is an online software, and it's basically like a digital corkboard. And I
Mm,
just adore it. It works so well for storing things in lists and on separate boards. And I I love being able to manage digital links and things because that's so much a part of being able to research, especially if you're writing about a place in another country during a pandemic. It's really good to be able to do some digital researching. So I'm able to put those links in and keep track of all of them. And it, I highly recommend it as a wonderful set of software. But there's another thing that I do that I am building and building more and more all the time, which is called a second brain. And
mm,
it's an idea that is promoted. I'm not sure if he's the originator of the idea, but he definitely is known for really championing it. A man named Tiago Forte, who has written a book called Building a Second Brain. It's great. And there's a whole protocol for capturing ideas, capturing information, and sorting it. And then different software programs you can pick up that you can link. So when you tag things, they'll link back and forth, and you end up getting this mind map based on the links you've created and the tags that you've
mm.
used that you can see in front of you on the screen. And it works really like
Yes.
your brain does in connecting thoughts and ideas. So that's how I organize and keep track of a lot of things. I used to be like a complete and utter devotee to the sticky note, which works until you have one that like loses its stick and flutters off and you can't find it. So these other things have worked really well for me at this point. The other thing that I do that's not digital and I find works really well is I keep a commonplace book. So that's a really old-fashioned notion. Do you keep one too, Edith? Like, I think a lot of people do.
Um, Describe it.
So they used to be popular for writing down things like quotes from books or comments that people said, things from sermons that you attended or lectures you attended. But
Mm, mm.
now people use them more like collections of information that you would have put on those sticky notes, but that you're gathering it together in one location. So I have mine right in front of me. It's just a red leather notebook, and you collect things by category. So you make an index, and I have categories for things like places I want to visit, books I want to read, movies I want to watch, museums of interest, books I wish I'd written. That's a great and humbling page. Um, and it's
Right.
just a great way to gather it all together. So that's one of my favorite places to keep track in physical space. How about you?
I do not keep a commonplace book. I have I have a notebook by my desk that has my daily to-do list,
Mhm.
but that's not. And then I've got the various categories on my whiteboard, which is right there. Immediate to-do list, semi-long term, some of it's personal, some of it's professional. The really long term that I'll probably never get to. Short story ideas. So it's kind of like a whiteboard
Uh-huh.
commonplace book.
Uh-huh.
Um, but for a particular project or a series, um, whether contemporary or historical, I write in a piece of software called Scrivener, and it's really easy to keep um, all the things about a series. So I have my running cumulative list of characters, every character I've ever written about and everything I know about them. Um, and if I start a new book in the same series, I just save that whole project and then I delete the content, delete the chapters, like the
Mm.
story part, but all the rest of it stays. And then I have all my research folders. And, for the Dot and Amelia book, I'll have, Boston police and Boston transportation and drinks and cigarette brands and just the
Mhm.
different transportation and some of those research files have links in them
Mhm.
to and it just goes straight to wherever they're linked to on the internet. And so it's just all in one place and I love that
Mhm.
hugely. And I really try to keep up that, especially that cumulative character list, which is also Boston police and what did their uniforms look like?
Sure.
It's not just a named character, but it's things like, yeah, the address of Etta's house. I mean, that might be under Etta, but
Mhm.
on Beacon Hill.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the main place. And then the shelf of physical books for that
Mhm.
era that I
Yeah.
have, you know, right there. This is a rather smaller one, but maybe 15 books about various things relating to 1920s Boston and Amelia Earhart and being a lady PI and all that stuff, Pinkerton girls. So that it's seems to be working for me
Yeah, it
so
sounds
far,
like a pretty
working like that. And then,
similar gatheringness, like that you have a location that you know where to find everything, whether it's your physical shelf or your digital self.
yeah, yeah. And then, of course, for my contemporary series, it's the same thing. It's just different kind of research.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Do you
Cape
find
Cod
that you
bike
rotate?
shops.
Do you rotate things in and out? Like I have a fairly small bookshelf in my office, and so I keep the type of research for the era that I'm working in at that point on that shelf, and then the other books get rotated up into the main library in the house, and that ends up being it keeps it sort of the circulating library, it keeps it fresh for like, do you have that happen where you rotate and roll what's in close at hand based on what you're researching?
Yeah, yeah. So all the Quaker and late 1800s, 19th century books, almost all of them went downstairs when I stopped writing that
Yeah,
series. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That
They're on
makes
the
sense.
shelf with a
Right.
bunch of other books, but
You
yeah,
never know if you're going to want them
yeah,
again for something else.
exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. It's different than giving away graduate school notebooks from 50 years ago. I'm
Although, if you
pretty
want
sure I
to,
don't need those
well,
anymore.
you want to write that 1974 book, who knows what you might want to dig out of the
True.
attic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. True. Yeah. Well, this is great. Anything else to add about research? Yeah,
I I think that the only other thing I would add is that if you're so inclined to write historicals, dive in, go for it,
yeah,
do some research. I bet you'll love it.
yeah. And ask people. People like for a short story, a Quaker midwife short story, I really needed to know about getting from Amesbury to Montreal on trains
Mm,
and what did the train look like and what was it? What kind of did they have sleeping cars and everything? There are train guys.
there
There
are.
are New England train guys, and they know absolutely everything, and they love to talk about it. And if you get it wrong, they're going to let you know. So, ask somebody,
Yes,
find your local historical society, your reference librarian at your local library, at the library of wherever you're writing about. Um, Send the Smithsonian an email. Like, people want to talk about this stuff. They love
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
Sounds great.
when I was writing a book with a blind character in the 1890, I went down to the Perkins School for the Blind in Watertown in a Boston suburb and got a tour and got to use their library, talked about what it would be like to be blind in 1890.
Yeah,
Um, and then a local blind friend of mine read the manuscript, listened to it, and set me straight on a couple things also about living as a blind person.
that's
So that
wonderful.
was handy. Yeah.
Research
Yeah. So
takes all
ask
forms.
people for help. Exactly. Exactly. Well, this has been fun, Jessica.
It's been fun.
We'll see you in the next section.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.